So we will start Principles of Microeconomics. This is the second week. We're going into Chapter 4. So now let's start. Chapter 4 is actually the most important chapter of the entire textbook because it's about supply and demand. There is no other chapter that's more important than this one. If you forget everything, remember this chapter. Some of you might have already previewed this chapter or learned some basic ideas of supply-demand. You will find this very familiar. That's good. But if it's your first time, this is very important. All right, so what will we learn in this chapter? This is the big picture. We will look at what is demand, what affects demand. We will look at supply and what affects supply, and how supply and demand jointly determine the price and quantity on the market. And then we'll see how different factors that would affect demand and supply affect the market price and quantity. And then we'll see how markets allocate resources. So what is a market? A market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular good or service. So buyers are a group that are determine the demand of the market, and sellers determine the supply. And a market is a group of buyers and sellers. One thing to note here is that it does not require that all these buyers and sellers have to be in the same location. If you think of online trading platforms like eBay, in Taiwan you have Shopee, none of these buyers and sellers are in the same room. However, they are on the same online trading platform. Okay, so a competitive market is many buyers and many sellers, and so each one of them have very small impact on prices. That's a competitive market. The extreme case would be a perfectly competitive market where all goods are exactly the same, and so that many buyers and sellers, there are so many that they have no one that has market power at all. Nobody can affect market price. So that's perfectly competitive. Yeah, so when you have this perfectly competitive market, what you get is that at the same market price, buyers can buy as much as they want, sellers can sell as much as they want. Now we'll look at, again, markets and competition, but my view. So this is not in the textbook. So markets are not only a group of buyers and sellers of a particular product, it's also that they are trading under certain rules. So a competitive market is buyers and sellers have negligible effect on price because there are substitutes on either side. Okay, let's think about this. So it's not only a group of buyers and sellers, but there is a particular trading rule that's governing how this market works. It could be free-form bargaining, just talk, or it could be some very rigorous auction rule, but it is some rule. Think about eBay or Shopee. Well, you have all these rules that are written in the terms of contract when you sign up to be a buyer or a seller on eBay or Shopee. And the buyers and sellers would have to follow these rules. Otherwise, the trading platform would actually disable the account. Actually, there are frauds that are caught on these trading platforms, and hence the sellers are banned. Of course, there's also buyer frauds who receive the good but claim that they don't receive it. And yeah, and anyway, but there are certain rules that are followed by most of the buyers and sellers on the market, and people who don't follow are kicked out. So what particular rule is of some importance? And so when we talk about a competitive market, it's not only that buyers and sellers can't affect the market price, that's the result. But the reason why they have negligible effect on prices is because there are substitutes on both sides. So what that means is that if I'm a buyer, if I don't want to buy from you, I can always find somebody else to buy from. If you're a seller, instead of selling to me, you can choose to sell to somebody else. You don't have to trade with me. So in that sense, so you and this other seller are perfect substitutes, and I'm a consumer, but with this, compared to this other consumer, we are perfect substitutes. So when we have substitutes on either side, the markets become competitive. And so a perfect competitive market exists when you have perfect substitutes of both buyers and sellers. So you can always switch. As a result, nobody can affect the market price. Each are a price taker because you can always switch. So I'm going one step further. So saying that markets are not only a group of buyers and sellers, but also there's an important market rule. And for a competitive market, it's not only about not being able to affect prices, that's the outcome of having substitutes. And to push this to the extreme, a perfectly competitive market is when you have perfect substitutes. And so price taking is the result of perfect substitutes. All right, so in this framework of a perfectly competitive market, we'll talk about demand, supply, and equilibrium. First, we'll look at demand. So a quantity demanded is the amount of a good that buyers are willing and able to buy. And the law of demand says, other things equal, when the price of a good goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. This is the law of demand. There are not many laws in economics, but the law of demand is like number one. So other things equal, when price goes up, the quantity demanded of that good would go down. It's very important, so I have to say this a third time. Yeah, given other things equal, when the price of a good goes up, the quantity demanded of that good goes down. So, of course, what this means is that there's a flip side saying that, yeah, if price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Well, yeah, it's the same thing. All right, so, so we can ask, so what happens to quantity demanded when you have different prices? This is what we call a demand schedule. I can give you a table that shows a relationship between different prices and the quantity demanded at that price. And of course, you can plot this, and so it will be a demand curve. So it's a graph showing the same relationship, the price and the quantity demanded of the same good. So, for example, here's Sophia's demand schedule for muffins. When the price is 0, Sophia wants to eat 16 muffins. When the price is 1, Sophia wants to eat 14 muffins. When the price is 2, Sophia wants to eat 12 muffins, and so on. Okay. And one thing you should note here is that Sophia's preference obeys the law of demand. When prices go up, quantity demanded goes down. You can plot this on a graph. So at price 0, Sophia wants 16 muffins. When price is $1, Sophia wants 14 muffins. When it's $2, Sophia wants 12 muffins. When it's $3, Sophia wants 10 muffins. $4, 8 muffins. And so when you draw this as a straight line, that's your demand curve. In this example, Sophia has a straight line as the demand curve. You can think of other situations where the curve could have different shapes. That's fine. Yeah, but in this simple example, it's a straight line. And you know that there's a law of demand. So when the price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So now you see that the demand curve is downward sloping. So that's one person's demand, right? Then we can talk about market demand. Basically, you're summing up everybody's demand for something. If it's a demand curve, you can sum it up horizontally to get the market demand curve. And so what you get is not only individual quantity demanded, but total quantity demanded at any given price. All right, so let's take a look. Suppose you have two buyers on the market for a muffin, Sofia and Diego. And okay, so Sofia, you have Sofia's demand schedule here. And Diego has slightly different demand schedule. It still follows the law of demand. That's very good. But how do we get the market quantity demanded? Well, the total quantity demanded, you just add it up, right? So at price 0, quantity demanded for Sofia is 16. Quantity demanded for Diego is 8. And so the market demand, quantity demanded is 24. For the price equal to 1, Sofia wants quantity demanded is 14 muffins. Diego's quantity demanded is 7 muffins. So market quantity demanded is 21 muffins. You can do the same thing, 12 plus 6 equals to 18, and so on. So what you get here is by adding up individual quantity demanded, you get market quantity demanded. And so you can plot this as well. So you get the market demand curve for muffins. And so here, one thing you should note is that market demand schedule and the market demand curve, these are the same thing. It's just numerical or graphical representation of the market demand. And here, again, you see the law of demand in work. So an increase in price means a decrease in the quantity of muffins demanded. One thing to note is that when you're moving along the demand curve, so you see this law of demand. But this is when other things is equal. We'll talk about what these other things can be. All right, so the demand curve shows how prices affects quantity demanded given other things equal. And so these other things are what we call non-price determinants of demand. And so this is what other things that will affect the buyer's demand of a good and that are not the price of that good. So let's take a look at what these other things are. But the key thing is that any of these things, if they change, that will shift the entire demand curve. So here's a list of examples of demand curve shifters: number of buyers, income, prices of related goods, tastes, and expectations. So now let's take a look at these one by one. So first, changes in the number of buyers. Suppose the number of buyers go up. Quantity demanded would go up because you're adding more people's quantity demanded. Suppose instead of just Sofia and Diego have quantity demanded for muffins, now you have a third person. Then market demand, of course, is going to go up. And that means that you're shifting the demand curve to the right. If the number of buyers go down, then the quantity demanded goes down. So that means that you're shifting the demand curve to the left. Let's think about an example of this. We have the demand curve for muffins. Now suppose we add a third buyer here. So this third buyer, he just wants 3 muffins no matter what. So it's like his rule. So at each price, you're increasing quantity demanded by 3. So it used to be 24, now it's 27. It used to be 21, now it's 24, and so on. So you're shifting quantity demanded by 3 for each price, and so you're shifting the demand curve to the right. A second thing that could affect this is changes in income. Here it depends on what good this is. If it's a normal good, so given other things equal, an increase in income will lead to an increase in demand. So you are shifting the demand curve to the right. If this is an inferior good, then an increase in income would lead to a decrease in demand. So you're shifting the demand curve to the left. You could also change the price in related goods. For example, if 2 goods are substitutes, an increase in price of one good would increase the demand of the other good. For example, suppose you want something for lunch. You can have pizzas or hamburgers. And these are substitutes. You only need to eat one of them. What that means is that if the price of pizza goes up, demand for hamburgers would actually go up as well. Why? Well, pizzas are more expensive. Let's have hamburgers today. And so you're shifting the hamburger demand curve to the right. If you think of this, nowadays you can choose, do you want to actually go to the movie theater? Or do you want to just watch it on Netflix or your favorite online streaming service, Disney Plus, or whatever service that you have? And of course, what that means is that if the price of online streaming goes up, demand for movie theaters would also go up. If you think of laptops and tablets, that's also like that. You can either choose to bring a laptop or a tablet to class. And if the price of a laptop is more expensive, then more people prefer to buy a tablet. And so the demand curve for tablets would shift to the right. If you think of vegetables, fresh vegetables and frozen vegetables are also substitutes. So when there's a typhoon or other natural disaster, fresh vegetables are not available and people would switch to frozen vegetables. But two goods could also be complements. So an increase in price in one good leads to a decrease in the demand of the other. So for example, smartphones and apps. If the price of a smartphone goes up, then the demand for these apps that go with the smartphone will actually go down. Because people buying fewer smartphones, that means people would buy fewer apps, and so the demand curve for apps will shift to the left. If you think of, like, say, coming to college and textbooks are also complements. If the college tuition goes up, demand for textbooks will go down. If you have to eat bagels with cream cheese, same thing. If the price of bagels go up, demand for cream cheese will shift to the left. When the gasoline price goes up, then these demand for big cars or trucks shift to the left. What could also change? Well, taste. If somehow people love this product more compared to before, then demand curve will shift to the right. So one good example is this. Back in 2008, there was this melamine incident in China. The formula powder were contaminated by things that are not supposed to be in there. And so that all of a sudden, people are afraid to buy this milk powder. So the fresh milk demand increased in Taiwan. Actually, here's a photo. This tea shop is saying that all of our milk is not from China, this and that. This is what happened back then because people were so afraid that these milk powder are contaminated. So all of a sudden, the taste for fresh milk has changed and because of these other events. And of course, that shifts the fresh milk demand to the right. The last thing I want to show is expectations about the future. So suppose you expect you're going to get a pay raise. Then, oh great, maybe I can afford iPhone 13 now. And of course, this expectation would be actually affecting your demand now. Similarly, if you expect that prices will go up tomorrow, current demand will actually go up. So in the textbook, there's this example that, so if you expect to get promoted, what you would do now is to go to fancy restaurant and celebrate, even though the promotion has not happened yet. One good example for this is if you look at the vegetable prices before a typhoon hits. Well, the typhoon has not come, so vegetables are not damaged, but prices go up because people expect that after the typhoon, prices will go up. And this expectation shifts current demand. So here's a good example of this. So this is actual data from Taipei's first wholesale fruit and vegetable market. Actually, this accounts for a significant portion of fruit and vegetables that are actually traded in Taiwan. And actually, the other markets use the price here as the price guide. So this is bok choy, bai cai. And so the price was between 10 and 20 NT dollars for quite a while. But at the first half of August, it just went like crazy. And if you look at the quantity that is traded, so it was roughly around 10,000 kilograms per day. But at the beginning of August, it started to rise a lot. But there was a sharp drop between August 7 and August 8. So what happened that day? This is 2009, August 7th and August 8th. If you're old enough, you should remember that was the 88水灾, Typhoon Morocco. So you see how the effect of a typhoon would actually affect the wholesale market. All right, so given these other things that are kept equal for the demand curve, we can talk about a change in demand or a shift of the entire demand curve versus change in quantity demanded. A change in demand is a shift of demand curve. This happens when these other, what we call non-price determinants of demand would change. And a change in the quantity demanded is moving along the demand curve. So this happens only when prices change. Okay, I think the way to memorize this is when you always see change in demand, add to yourself curve. So it's change in demand curve. So yeah, so that reminds you it's the whole demand curve that is changing. But when you say that there's a change in the quantity demanded, that's just changing the quantity demanded. You're moving along the same demand curve. All right, so let's try to summarize. So the price of the good itself would actually, you would not shift the demand curve, you would move along the same demand curve. But everything else shifts the demand curve. Income, prices of related goods, taste, expectation, number of buyers. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, so this is my iPad Pro and my Apple Pencil. So draw a demand curve for iPad Pro and a point A, P1, Q1 on the demand curve. What happens to each of these following scenarios? So the price of Apple Pencil goes down. B, the price of iPad Pro goes down. C, consumers' incomes goes down. And iPad Pro, we assume here, is a normal good. Okay, so now prepare to join Slido. So what happens when the price of Apple Pencil falls? The demand curve shifts to the left, or the demand curve shifts to the right. Move down along the demand curve to point B with a lower price, higher quantity. Or you move up along the demand curve to a point with a higher price and lower quantity. Or none of the above. So you have 5 seconds left. Please hurry up. Make your choice. Okay, so let's look at your answers. 5 of you said demand curve shift to the left. 29 of you said demand curve shifts to the right. 16 say move down along demand curve to point B with lower price and higher quantity. And move up along the demand curve for 4 of you. All right, and the answer is the demand curve shifts to the right. So 29 of you got this right. For those who are not sure, let's think carefully. So the price of an Apple Pencil falls. So iPad Pro and Apple Pencil are complements. Well, I mean, without the Apple Pencil, iPad Pro is already very powerful. But with that, it's like a miracle. Okay, so when Apple Pencils are cheaper, that means consumers are attracted to iPad Pro much more because now it's more likely that they can afford an Apple Pencil. So you're shifting the demand curve of the iPad Pro to the right. And in fact, so for a fixed price, the quantity demanded Q1 shifts to Q2. And of course, at different prices, the quantity demanded all shift. And so you're shifting the entire demand curve to the right. And of course here, we are assuming that iPad Pro and Apple Pencils are complements. For some people, they may not be. Some people don't need, they believe in Steve Jobs' idea that your finger is the best stylus. So you don't need something else. But the whole point here is that in the market, if a lot of people think iPad Pro and Apple Pencils are complements, their individual demands will be affected. Others who don't think so, their demand would not change, but the market demand curve, as a result of aggregating everybody's demand, what you get is a shift to the right. All right, next question. Are you ready? Okay, so draw the demand curve for iPad Pro and a point A on the demand curve. What happens when the price of iPad Pro falls? Demand curve shifts to the left, demand curve shifts to the right, move down along the demand curve to a point lower P and higher Q, or move up along the demand curve to a point with higher P and lower Q, or none of the above. Okay, time's up. The majority of you say move down along the demand curve to a point with lower P and higher Q, and that is the correct answer. Okay, remember, everything else changes the demand and shifts the demand curve to the left or right, but the price of this good does not change the demand curve. You're moving along the demand curve. So when the price of iPad Pro falls, you're moving down the demand curve for iPad Pro, so say to point B, and of course the law of demand says you're going to get a lower price and higher quantity. A higher quantity demanded. So P2 is below P1 and Q2 is above Q1. And the demand curve does not shift. Yeah, so you're moving along the demand curve. All right, part C. Get ready. What happens when consumer income falls? Here we're assuming that iPad Pro is a normal good. Demand curve shift to the left, demand curve shift to the right, move down along the demand curve to a point where prices are lower, quantity demanded are higher, or move up along the demand curve to get a higher price but lower quantity, or none of the above. Okay, most of you say demand curve shifts to the left, and that is the right answer. So here we're assuming that iPad Pro is a normal good. So that means that if income goes down, consumers will buy less iPad Pros for a given price. So here, the example here, you're seeing that at the same price P1, quantity demanded drops to Q2, which is to the left of Q1. So the entire demand curve shifts to the left. So demand for iPad Pro is going down. One thing I want to say is that it is important we're assuming that iPad Pro is a normal good. Actually, things depend. I mean, if you're a student, I believe on campus, suppose you start to get a scholarship, or if you start to be a private tutor, your income goes up, your demand for a bicycle would actually go up. Because if you don't have a bicycle on NTU campus, going from class to class is very difficult. Even if everything's online, I mean, going from your dormitory to the restaurants, to the gym, or to these other places, not as easy. But after you graduate, when your income further increases, maybe a bicycle is not a normal good anymore. In that case, maybe a motorcycle is what you want. In that situation, a bicycle might be no longer a normal good. It could even be an inferior good. And if you think if your income keeps increasing, at some point, a motorcycle could also be an inferior good because you want to buy a car. At that income range, a motorcycle would be an inferior good, but a Toyota would be a normal good. But of course, I mean, if you become a CEO of a startup company, so maybe even a Toyota would be an inferior good for you. You want a BMW or a Lexus. So that really depends. All right, so that's the first section of chapter 4, which is talking about demand. So do you have any questions about this part? Somebody's asking, Professor, I'm still a bit confused how to identify if the graph moves to the right, left, below, or up. So the demand curve is downward sloping. So the way to think of this, I think it's better to just say, okay, so for the curve, it's just left and right. When I say up and down, I'm referring to quantity demanded going up or going down. But because quantity is on the horizontal axis, so on the graph, you're shifting to the right or left. because the x-axis is quantity. So when the quantity demanded goes up, the demand curve is shifting to the right. And if quantity demanded is going down at all of these prices, then the whole curve is shifting to the left. Visually, you can say, oh, so it looks like it's shifting up as well. Yeah, you can also view it that way as well, but usually the way we think of it is that given this price, is the quantity demanded going up, in which your curve is shifting to the right, or going down, in which your curve is shifting to the left? Yeah, so because you're thinking about different prices. At this price, how does the quantity demanded change? At another price, how does the quantity demanded change? And so on. Okay, next question. So the fact that something is or is not an inferior good will be very specific to the individual. Yeah, so remember, we can talk about market demand and individual demand. So when we talk about how your income would affect your individual demand, so yeah, if the good to you is a normal good or inferior good, yeah, so that's at the individual level, depends on your income. So for the same good could be a normal good for some people, an inferior good for somebody else. But once you get all of these individual demand curves, you can aggregate that. So you're basically adding up the demand curve horizontally to get a market demand curve. So you can still talk about, for the whole market, is this a normal good or inferior good? Yeah. And of course, that depends on, like, say, each individual demands. So it depends. I mean, it could be that the majority of people think this is normal good, and so that dominates the minority. But it could also be that for some people, they think this is an inferior good, and they have a huge effect. But the other people, even though it's a normal effect, the shift is very small, so that when you do the aggregation, this minority that have a big effect would actually swamp the other people. So that depends. So if you think of an iPad Pro, for some people, they might think that iPad Pro is an inferior good. And so their demand curve would shift the opposite of other people who think iPad Pro is a normal good. Well, that's fine. I mean, when you aggregate in the market, then yeah, so you can see how in the aggregate what's going to happen. And so, for example, if you think of the minimum wage in Taiwan, they're going to raise this by 6% starting from next year. I think they just announced this in the news. That would basically increase, especially those people who are affected by the minimum income. That would actually affect their income level. And of course, you can ask, okay, so what is that, the effect of that on, like, say, the demand for iPad Pro? And of course, for some people, their income is not affected. Others, there could be the incomes go up, and if for them the iPad Pro is a normal good, then yeah, then they would buy more, and so you'll be shifting these people's individual demands to the right. And of course, when you aggregate everything, you can see if the market demand curve is shifting to the right or to the left. All right, so I think we should prepare to do the experiment. So this is experiment 2. We start a loopy game in week 1. Now we're going to go into week 2. This experiment is called gains from trade. And so it's trying to illustrate what you've learned in chapter 2 and chapter 3 about gains from trade. This experiment was designed to be done in person, but because of the online, so we have designed an online version. So, but anyway, let me go through the in-person version first, and then we'll talk about how we'll deal with the online situation. So in the in-person version, 2 to 4 of you would form a group. Each group will have 8 poker cards. I usually randomly hand out cards to everybody. So each of you gets 8 poker cards. And then you have to pick 5 of these to form a set and to earn points. And so here's the point conversion list. So here is the rules. So if your set is a flush, that means all 5 of them are of the same suit, all spades, all hearts, or clubs, or diamonds, you get 1 point. If you get a full house, then you get 2 points. Full house means you have 3 of the same number, 2 of the other same number. So that's a full house. So if you get 3 aces and 2 jacks, that's a full house. You can get a straight, so you get a number. So like ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. You can get all the way up to JQKA2 or something like that. Anything like that is fine. Yeah, so then you get 3 points. To get 4 points, you need 铁枝, which is 5 of a kind, like A, or 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and so on. And to get 5 points, you need a straight flush. So you need a sequence of the same suit. So like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but all in spades or all in diamonds, and so on. So in round 1, it's out turkey, so you can only use the 8 cards you have at hand. In round 2, you are allowed to trade with your neighboring group. In round 3, you're allowed to trade with anybody in the room. So this illustrates how allowing for trade and either neighboring trading or free trade could actually result in gains from trade. Okay, unfortunately, we have to do this online, so please do as follows. The TA will randomly assign you to different groups. Your last 2 digits of your student ID number will be the 2 cards that you draw. Like if for me, my student ID number was 42, I get a 4 and a 2. When you're randomly grouped into 4 people in a group, each of you have 2 numbers, so you have 8 numbers. We can't distinguish between different suits, so you can only try to collect either a full house, a straight, or 5 of a kind. But then at least you'll get either 2 points, 3 points, or 4 points if you can get any of these combinations. All right, so, and the TA is going to open up a Google survey so that you can record your result. So everybody needs to submit your own survey result because this participation, each one of you will get experimental points. If you don't submit a Google survey response, then you won't get that point. Okay, so I believe everybody is back. So I have put the Google form in the link so you can access the link. Fill in the result of round 1. So we'll do another round 2, where you are allowed to switch. People might have found that they cannot enter or exit the group in round 1. That is on purpose. But starting from round 2, you will be allowed to move to a different group. And so you can move in and out of different groups and decide what you want to do. Once I send you into the group, so first thing is that inside the group, you should be able to fill in, so for each group, what are your numbers and which suit that you achieve. And then we will be moving into round 2, will allow you to move in or out different groups. And so you can decide which group to join and which group to form this new points. Okay, I believe everybody is back, so let me share your current results. This is round 1. 1/3 of you got 0. Slightly more than 1/3 got 2 points. And some of you got 3. Very few got 4. This is round 1. In round 2, almost nobody got 0. Some of you got 2, some got 3, but a lot of you got 4 points. So that's how powerful gains from trade is. All right, so let's stop here and let's continue the lecture. So we talked about demand. Now we're going to move to supply. So quantity supplied, just like quantity demanded, is the amount of a good that sellers are willing and able to sell. So you have the law of supply, just like the law of demand, saying other things being equal, when prices go up, quantity supply goes up. So this is basically in parallel with what you see in demand. So just like the law of demand, when prices go down, quantity supplied goes down. So everything is the same thing. And so just like you have a demand schedule, you can have a supply schedule. So this is the relationship between prices and quantity supplied. And just like you have a demand curve, you can have a supply curve. This is the relationship that's drawn in a graph. So here's Starbucks supply schedule for muffins. When price is 0, quantity supplied is 0. When price is 1, quantity supplied of muffins is 3. When price is 2, quantity supplied is 6, and so on. And here, Starbucks supply schedule follows the law of supply. When prices go up, quantity supply goes up. So you can plot this at price 0, quantity supplied is 0. Price 1, quantity supplied is 3. Price is 2, quantity supplied is 6. Price is 3, quantity supplied is 9. Price is 4, quantity supplied is 12, and so on. So you can draw this straight line over here. And of course, in this example, it's a straight line because of this particular example. The supply curve could have different shapes depending on whatever supply schedule you are looking at. And just like you can talk about market demand, market supply is the sum of supplies of all sellers. So you can have a market supply curve, which is horizontally adding up individual supply curves. So you get the total quantity supplied at any given price, and so you just add this up. So for example, suppose you have 2 sellers of muffins, Starbucks and Dante Coffee. So you have Starbucks supply schedule, and then you have Dante's supply schedule. And the market demand, just like the market demand, you do the market supply. Market supply is adding it up. So 0 plus 0 is 0, 3 plus 2 is 5, 6 plus 4 is 10, and so on. So market supply schedule is this red line over here. And of course, you can plot this on a graph. So here's your market supply curve. And so up to here, everything is just like demand, right? And you have quantity demanded, you have demand curve, demand schedule, you have quantity supplied, supply curve, supply schedule, and then you have market supply. So here, again, you see the law of supply at work. When prices go up, quantity supplied goes up. And that's moving along your supply curve. Okay, so just like we have demand curve shifters, we can also have supply curve shifters. So this gives you how prices affect quantity supplied, other things equal. And so these other things are what we call non-price determinants of supply. And so if you change these other things, you will shift the supply curve. Everything is mirroring what you see in the demand side. Okay, so here's a list of things that we'll talk about that will shift the supply curve. Input prices, technology, number of sellers, and expectations. So first, changes in input prices. So what are these input prices? Well, to produce a good or service, you need to hire labor. So you need to pay wages. When wages change, input prices change, and that would affect supply. You need raw material. So when the prices of raw material changes, then the supply curve would also change. So when the input prices go down, this means that production is more profitable at each given output price. So quantity supplied at that output price would go up, would increase. So you're shifting the supply curve to the right. So supply is negatively correlated with the price of input. So for example, we have the muffin example. Here's the supply curve for muffins. If the price of flour goes down, that means producing the same amount of muffins is cheaper because the raw material price is smaller. And so that means that at each given price, the seller's quantity supplied is going to go up. Here, let's say it's going to increase by 5. So for each price, the quantity supplied is going to increase by 5 because the input price is cheaper. And so I'm shifting my entire supplier curve to the right. Next one, change in technology. When given the current technology, so this determines how much input would create how much output. And so if suppose you have a technology improvement, and so it's just like a fall in input price, you would be shifting the supply curve to the right. Because at the same price, you're willing to sell more, so your quantity supplied is larger, so the supply curve is shifting to the right. Change in the number of sellers. Well, this is the same thing as just like you see when you change the number of buyers, you increase quantity demanded. So when you change the number of sellers, you change the quantity supplied because you're adding more sellers or you're adding less sellers. So an increase in the quantity supplied means that you're shifting the supply curve to the right. If you decrease the number of sellers, then you're adding fewer individual quantities supplied, so your supply curve is shifting to the left. The last one is expectations about the future. So for example, if there's an event in the Middle East, people expect oil prices will go up tomorrow. That means that sellers of oil, say local producers, would say, hey, maybe I should reduce my supply now and store it because I can sell it at a higher price tomorrow. And of course, that means that the supply curve today is shifting to the left. And you can do this adjustment, especially if this good is not perishable. I mean, if you think about vegetables, then it's a little bit more challenging because these produce could rot, cannot store it that easily. But if these are durable goods, I mean, oil has been sitting there for millions of years underground, and now you just store it in your silo, so you can adjust supply accordingly. Okay, so one interesting thing is that is bok choy perishable or not? This is the same graph that I showed you about the Typhoon Morocco affecting the quantity and prices of bok choy in the Taipei First Wholesale Fruit and Vegetable Market. And so you can see that there could be a lot of things happening here. Actually, one thing you should note is that quantity in the market is actually increased the week before the typhoon hit. And so it's almost like the farmers expect that, oh, so there's a typhoon alert, so maybe I should try to sell now, instead of waiting for the typhoon to hit, and so all of my produce are damaged. And of course, it could also be that buyers are expecting that prices are going up, and so they rush to the market and try to buy now as well. Well, there could be a lot of different forces at work here, but one thing that is important here is that expectation does matter. Okay, so just like we can talk about a shift in the demand curve versus moving along the demand curve, we can have a shift on the supply curve. So that's called change in supply. Or remember, if you always forget, then just always add curve. So it's a change in supply curve compared to change in the quantity supplied. That's moving along the same supply curve. And so the key thing, of course, is the same thing. So if you're changing the price of the good, it's a change in quantity supplied. But if you're changing all these other things, everything else, that's a change in the supply curve. So to summarize, the price of the good itself is going to make a change in the quantity supplied. So you're moving along the same supply curve. But everything else, input prices, technology, expectations, number of sellers, all of these shift the supply curve. Now it's the quiz time. Draw a supply curve for apple juice, S1, and a point A on the supply curve. What happens in each of the following scenarios? A, grocery stores cut the price of apple juice. B, a technology advancement allows apple juice to be produced at lower price. C, grocery stores cut the price of orange juice. Okay, let's start. So now draw a supply curve for apple juice and a point A on the supply curve. What happens when grocery stores cut the price of apple juice? Supply curve shifts to the left, supply curve shifts to the right, move down along the supply curve so that with a lower price and quantity, or move up along the supply curve to a point B with higher price and quantity, or none of the above. Okay, time's up. Let's see your answers. So some of you say supply curve shift to the left, some say shift to the right. Majority of you say move down along the supply curve to a point B with lower price and lower quantity, and that is the right answer. Very good. Why is that? Okay, so we're talking about the market for apple juice. When you decrease the price in apple juice, you're moving down along the same supply curve to a lower price and lower quantity. So the supply curve did not shift. Remember, if the price of its goods is the thing that is changing, the supply curve does not shift. Okay, let's go to part B. So again, we have a supply curve of apple juice and then a point A on the supply curve. What happens when technology advances and now apple juice can be produced at a lower price? So again, supply curve shift to the left, shift to the right, or move down along the supply curve, or move up along the supply curve, or none of the above. Okay, so you have 5 seconds left. Hurry up. Now let's look at your answers. The majority of you say supply curve shifts to the right. Yes, it is. Supply curve shifts to the right is the right answer. So, okay, what happens when we have a technological advancement? Well, better technology means that you can produce at a lower cost. So at each price, quantity supplied is going to increase. So supply curve is going to shift to the right. All right, part C. What happens when the grocery store cuts the price of orange juice? So this is the apple juice market, the supply curve of an apple juice. And what happens when the stores are cutting the price of orange juice? Supply curve shifts to the left, supply curve shifts to the right, move up along the supply curve, move down along the supply curve, or none of the above. Okay, time's up. Let's look at the answers. 19 of you say supply curve shift to the left. 13 of you say supply curve shift to the right. Move down along the curve and move up, 6 of you each. And 13 of you say none of the above. This is interesting. This is, I think, the most divided answers we've ever seen. And so many people are saying none of the above. And actually, none of the above is correct. This is a trick question. Why is that? Okay. When we decrease the price of orange juice, apple juice and orange juice are substitutes. So the demand of apple juice will change, but not the supply. So the supply curve and the point A, nothing changes. So supply curve does not shift, and you're not even moving along up or down the supply curve because it's the demand that changed. Ooh, really tricky. All right, so up to here, so this is the supply part. And so do you have any questions about this? Is bok choy perishable? I missed the conclusion. Yeah, so for the farmers, they can choose to harvest bok choy, like say, a couple of days earlier or later. So in that sense, if you're thinking about, do you want to go to the market today or tomorrow? In that sense, it's not that perishable. It's not like it's going to vanish tomorrow. But compared to buying or selling cars, I mean, the car today versus the car tomorrow, I mean, there's no difference at all. And in fact, you can have a car for like a whole month at the dealership and then sell it. Well, it's the same thing. But compared to that, the bok choy is more perishable compared to like say cars. But of course, I mean, if you have a longer scale, I mean, a car would last maybe 15 years, but after 20 years, I mean, it's really an antique, right? And so in that sense, cars are still perishable after 20 years. Okay, next one. So in the last question, won't the decrease in orange juice price affect the supply curve of apple juice at all? The juice factory may shift the production line. That is a very good question. Can there be this is what we call joint production. So the juice company decides to shift from apple juice to orange juice. Yeah, that is actually a very good question. But if you actually know the production process of orange juice and apple juice, you would know that it's not that easy to shift production. I mean, because how you process apples is very different from how you process oranges. But yeah, but you are right. I mean, in the long run, so suppose there's a permanent shift in prices of orange juice and apple juice, then in the long run, so firms could say, oh, instead of producing orange juice, I want to produce more, I want to remodel the whole factory and then use that to produce apple juice instead. So in that sense, you are right. Next one, won't the change of demand curve cause the movement along the supply curve? Yeah, so when we talk about equilibrium, we will talk about that. So it will change the equilibrium when demand curve shifts, but that means that the supply curve is not changing. So it's the equilibrium that's moving from one point to the other point on the supply curve. So in that sense, yeah, you are way ahead, but you're right. All right, so let's go to equilibrium. We talked about supply and demand, so we can now go to equilibrium. And this is where quantity supplied equals to quantity demanded. All right, so here it is. So here we have a demand curve and a supply curve. At price $3, quantity demanded is 15. Quantity supplied is also 15. So that's the equilibrium quantity. And at 15, at the equilibrium price of $3. So now we have an expert question, survey question, about price gouging. Connecticut should pass its Senate Bill 60, which states that during a severe weather event emergency, no person within the chain of distribution of consumer goods and services shall sell or offer to sell consumer goods or services for a price that is unconscionably excessive. Do you agree? Do you think economists would agree or disagree? So now this is just a poll. So do you agree or disagree? Connecticut should pass its Senate Bill 60, which states that during a severe weather event emergency, no person within the chain of distribution of consumer goods and services should sell or offer to sell consumer goods or services for a price that is unconscionably excessive. Strongly agree, agree, uncertain, disagree, strongly disagree, no opinion, prefer not to answer. All right, so now let's take a look. So 9 of you strongly agree, 26 agree, 5 uncertain, 15 disagree, nobody strongly disagrees or no opinion. Okay. The more interesting question is for you to guess. This is part of the quiz. So do economists agree or disagree on this statement? So here we're grouping the strongly agree and agree to be agree, and strongly disagree and disagree to be disagree. 100% economists agree, 50 to 99%, 1 to 49%, 0%, or don't know. You have 5 seconds left, so please hurry up. Okay, so 25 of you say 50 to 99% economists agree. 24 if you say 1 to 49. And the answer is less than 50%, so 1 to 49%. Let's take a look. So economists, 77% disagree, 7% agree, and 16% are uncertain. So it's not like 100% disagree, but majority disagree. And the key thing here is that if you pass a law like this, then you have to talk about what is a price that is unconscionably excessive. Well, during the SARS era, a facial mask like the N95, those were like very expensive. Is that unconscionably excessive? Well, they were life-saving. And in fact, because of the price control, what happens during the SARS era was that even the doctors couldn't get these life-saving equipment. So yeah, okay, anyway, but there are still economists who agree that you should pass this kind of law, and some economists are not sure. So yeah. All right, so let's take a look. Why do economists think a lot of these disagree with banning price gouging? Well, because prices are a very important signal. So take a look. So if the market is not in equilibrium, so for example, if you have a surplus, this is when quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. So for example, if you have the price at $5, quantity demanded is 9 muffins, quantity supplied is 25 muffins. So you have excess supply or surplus of 16 muffins. If you have a surplus, if we allow the prices to change, sellers will try to increase sales by cutting the price. This causes quantity demanded to increase, quantity supplied to fall, and this lowers the surplus and until you go back to equilibrium. So allowing the price to adjust, you can go back to equilibrium. Similarly, if you have the prices too low, then you have a shortage or excess demand. Suppose the price is $1. Then quantity demanded is 21 muffins, but quantity supplied is only 5 muffins. So you have a shortage of 16 muffins. And of course, like for example, when you ban price gouging, that's what's going to happen. You have a shortage. And if you allow the prices to adjust, sellers would raise the price. This reduces quantity demanded, increases quantity supplied, and so this reduces the shortage until you go back to the market equilibrium where there is no shortage at all. So here you see that the price adjustment is very important because this allows the market to adjust so that when there's a surplus or when there's a shortage, so prices would change and go back to equilibrium. If you do not allow prices to change, then this would not be able to happen. Okay, so now we'll look at what happens when you have something change and how that affects the equilibrium. Here we have a recipe, 3 steps. First, whether this event shifts the supply curve, demand curve, or both. Step 2, which direction is the curves shifting, to the right or to the left? And then use the supply and demand diagram to compare the initial and the new equilibrium. And so you can see the effect on equilibrium prices and quantity. Let's take a look. So here is your supply-demand diagram. Usually we put the price on the horizontal axis and the quantity on the vertical axis. So you can draw the demand curve, say demand curve for muffins here, and the supply curve for muffins, so D1 and S1. And the intersection of supply and demand is your market equilibrium, and which would determine the price and quantity on the market. So here P1 and Q1. So suppose we have an event, increase in the price of donuts. What would that do to the market of muffins? Well, muffins and donuts are substitutes. If I eat donuts, I would eat less muffins, and vice versa. So if the price of donuts go up, I would eat more muffins. So demand curve will shift, and it will shift to the right because it substitutes. Well, donuts are expensive, so now I'll switch to muffins. And so you can, step 3, you can draw the new P2, Q2 to find that prices and quantity both went up. Okay, next example. There's a new technology for muffin production. So does that shift the supply curve or demand curve, or both? Well, it shifts the supply curve because technology is going to reduce production costs. Does it shift the supply curve to the left or right? Well, it's going to shift it to the right because lower cost means that, so at any given price, quantity supplied will go up. So production is more profitable because you have lower costs. And what is the effect on the equilibrium? Well, now you can plot P2 and Q2, and you find that prices go down, but quantity in equilibrium goes up. What about both events happening? Prices of donuts go up, and new technology is going to reduce production costs. Now, of course, we have already learned in part A and part B, well, both curves are going to shift. And what's the direction? Well, both are going to shift to the right. What about the new equilibrium? Now, we know that quantity is going to go up from part A and part B, but prices depend. If demand increases more than supply, as we see over here in this graph, the overall price effect is price is going to go up. But it could also be that if supply is shifting more than demand, then prices could go down. So, okay, this is one thing that's very important. Economics is not only about drawing graphs. You need to quantify how big are these shifts, because when they go opposite directions, you have to know which is increasing more than the other to actually nail the effect of prices. If you remember, one of the 10 principles of economics is markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. And in the market economy, prices adjust to balance supply and demand. And so equilibrium prices are signals to guide economic decisions and allocate scarce resources. And it is this reason why economists think that, hey, not allowing prices to adjust when there's a natural disaster may not be a good idea, because you need this to balance supply and demand. If you have price control and do not allow prices to increase when there's a natural disaster, then it's likely you have a shortage. Is a shortage better than the case when prices are very high? Well, yeah, I mean, there is a trade-off there. Life is hard. Okay, now let's go to another active learning activity. So use the 3-step method to analyze the effect on the equilibrium price and quantity of iPad Pro. Event A, a fall in the price of Galaxy Tab S7 Plus. Event B, the price of Apple A12Z CPU falls because of an abundant supply of CPUs beyond TSMC. And event C, both A and B occur simultaneously. Okay, so now let's join the quiz. So what's the effect of equilibrium price and quantity of iPad Pro if there is a fall in the price of Galaxy Tab S7 Plus? Both price and quantity go up, both go down. Prices go up, but quantity goes down, or prices go down, but quantity goes up, or I don't know. You might need to have to draw the supply and demand curve and actually see, so again, which shifts and so on. Okay, so let's look at your answers. Some of you say both go up. A lot of you say both go down, so that's the majority, and that's the right answer. Let's take a look. So step one. So how does Galaxy Tab price fall affect the market of iPad Pros? Well, now you have a cheaper option. If you are a Jobs fan, this doesn't change. This doesn't affect you. You don't care about Galaxy Tab. But if you are a normal consumer, then you might say, hey, iPad Pro is so expensive, maybe I should switch to Galaxy Tab. So you're shifting the demand for iPad Pro. And the demand curve is shifting to the left because some consumers will switch. And the effect of this, P2 and Q2, the new equilibrium, you have both prices and quantity are dropping. Okay, next one. What happens if the price of the A12Z CPU used in iPad Pro is going to drop because there are more suppliers beyond TSMC? So both price and quantity go up or go down, or one going up or one going down, or you don't know. Again, the idea here is you should try to draw the supply-demand graph and then analyze which curves is shifting and what is the effect of price and quantity. Okay, so here are your answers. 30 of you say the price is going to go down, but quantity is going to go up. And that is the right answer. So quite a few of you are pretty advanced. Okay, let's take a look. So a fall in the price of the A12Z CPUs, so that means that you're going to reduce the production costs. And so your supply curve is going to shift to the right. And so if you draw this on your supply-demand diagram, then you see that price is going to go down and quantity is going to go up. Now, let's go to the next quiz. And so what is the effect if both events happens? So fall in the price of Galaxy Tab S7 Plus and the A12Z CPU price is going to go down as well. So would the both prices go up or go down, or price is going to go up but quantity not, or vice versa, or you don't know? So again, you should draw the supply-demand curve to analyze this. Okay, so a lot of people say don't know. But some of you say both price and quantity goes down, or price is going to go down but quantity is going to go up. Actually, this time, 3 of your answers are all correct because there is ambiguity here. So key thing is this. So we already know that both of your curves are going to shift from part A and B, and both of them are shifting, but demand curve is shifting to the left, supply curve is shifting to the right. So what that means is that we know for sure that prices are going to go down. This part is certain. But whether or not the quantity is going to go up depends. So if your demand curve shift to the left is smaller than your supply curve shift to the right, then quantity is going to increase. But if your supply curve shift to the right is smaller than the demand curve shift to the left, quantity could decrease. So your quantity part is ambiguous. So it depends on whether or not the demand effect is larger than the supply effect or vice versa. All right, so now is the last think, pair, share discussion here. So you're watching a national news broadcast. It's reported that a typhoon is heading for the coast of Mado and that it will likely destroy much of this year's pomelo crow. Your roommate says, hey, this is not going to affect me. I don't eat pomelos. I only drink grape juice. So as an eager economics student, what's your response going to be? And what other markets will be impacted by the destroyed pomelo crow, and how? So the Mid-Autumn Festival just went by, and so you might have ate a lot of pomelos. But if your roommate says, well, I don't care. I mean, I only drink grape juice. So what do you think? So you have a typhoon that's heading towards Mado, but your roommate says, well, I don't eat pomelos. I only drink grape juice. So what's your response? The next question is about what other markets will be impacted by the destroyed pomelo crow. So you can type in your answers and we'll show it in the word cloud. The first question is, what's your response to your roommate who thinks that, oh, I don't eat pomelos. Actually, I was in this medication that I was not allowed to eat pomelos. So is it true that you're not affected? Well, that really depends. Because even if you don't eat pomelos at all, for some people, grapefruit and pomelos are substitutes. And so what that means is that if a typhoon is going to hit Mato and reduce the production of pomelos, the prices of pomelo would go up, which means that the demand for grapefruit would also go up. So even though you don't eat pomelos, what's going to happen is that your grapefruit juice would actually see a price increase because there's an increase in demand in grapefruit juice. And okay, so there are other markets that could be affected like this, because if pomelos are substitutes of other fruits, or maybe because it's the Mid-Autumn Festival, people eat mooncakes with pomelos. So if the price of pomelo goes up, then that could also affect mooncake market. You could think of people who think that, oh, I have to eat mooncakes with pomelos, then there will be compliments. But it could also be that usually what happens is that people buy mooncakes or pomelos as gifts to other people. And in this case, the pomelo market, you see this reduce in production, so the supply curve is shifting to the left. And so prices are very high, quantity is small. So people switch to buy mooncakes to give to their friends and relatives instead. And so of course, mooncake prices is going to go up. So these are substitutes in terms of gifts to hand out to your friends during the festival. Okay, so here you see other things. Oh, barbecue. Yes, barbecue could also be affected because people think that you should barbecue during Mid-Autumn Festival. Oh, that's a good question. Would the demand for barbecue go up or go down? Well, that depends. All right, so from your responses, I can see that, yeah, this is an open question, so there is no single answer, but a lot of you got the idea. All right, so to summarize, so economists use the model of supply and demand to look at competitive markets. So you have a lot of buyers and sellers, price takers, and you have demand. Demand curve, this reflects, so how much quantity is demanded depending on the price, and you have law of demand. Prices go up, quantity demanded goes down, and vice versa. And so you have a downward sloping demand curve. And then you have other what we call non-price determinants of demand: income, substitute and complement prices, taste, expectations, and number of buyers. If any of these changes, the demand curve changes. And on the other side, you have supply. So the supply curve gives you, at each price, how much quantity is provided by each of these sellers and the whole market. We have the law of supply. As the prices go up, quantity supplied goes up. So you have an upward sloping supply curve. And then you have other non-price determinants of supply. So input prices, technology, expectation, and the number of sellers. And if any of these other factors change, supply curve would shift. And the interaction between supply and demand basically determines market price and quantity. And so in fact, it's the intersection of supply curve and demand curve. That's the equilibrium. There, at this equilibrium price, quantity supplied equals to quantity demanded, and that's the equilibrium quantity. So the key thing here is that buyers and sellers, their interaction, their behavior in the market drives things towards the equilibrium. If the price is too high, then there's a surplus. So the sellers will start to cut the prices, and so that market price would fall and go back to equilibrium. When the market price is too low, it's below the equilibrium price, then there will be a shortage, and so buyers will bid up the price, and the market price will go up and go back to equilibrium. To analyze how different events would affect the market, we use the supply and demand diagram to examine the effect on equilibrium price and quantity, the three-step recipe, which curve is going to shift, demand, supply, or both, which direction is going to shift, and look at the new equilibrium quantity and price and compare that with the initial equilibrium quantity and price. And in the market economy, prices are a good signal that guides economic decisions and allocates scarce resources. So this is my one-page summary. This whole chapter 4 is about supply, demand, and equilibrium. As I stated at the very beginning, this is one of the most important chapters in the whole textbook. So if you forget anything of the book, this is the last thing you should forget. And so we have 3 steps: which curve is going to move, which direction is going to move, and use the supply-demand diagram to find how equilibrium prices and quantity change. So this is additional homework questions. True or false? If the demand for lettuce falls, the price will fall, causing the demand to go back up. This sounds like a strange statement. I'm not sure if you think this is true or false, or you're not sure. Yeah, but that's the homework. So you should state, I think this is true, or I think this is false, and here's why. Next one, true or false? Suppose the enrollment at your university unexpectedly declines. Then the apartment owners in the area will face higher vacancy rates and might raise their rents to compensate. True or false? You might find this strange, or maybe you're very confident it's wrong or it's right. But that's the whole point. So think carefully and state, I think this is true, or I think this is false, and here's why. Last one. The discovery of a new method of birth control that is safer, cheaper, more effective, and easier to use than any other method would reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies. True or false? Again, well, good. Technology advancement, right? I mean, so does that mean that unwanted pregnancies will go down? Think carefully, state, I think this is true, or I think this is false. Describe why that is so. All right, so that's the end of this chapter. And so if you have any questions, you can ask in Slido. So that's the end. And so I think we can end the class now. Thank you very much for your participation. See you next Friday, so when we go into chapter 5. Thank you very much.